The case of Doreen Herbert. Doreen Herbert was born on November 29, 1952, in California, into a family of 5 children. From an early age, she was a kind and positive individual, always seeking ways to help others. After completing college, Doreen moved to San Francisco and started working as a physical therapist. At the age of 24, she met Michael Venice, a man employed in a factory near Doreen's clinic. After becoming acquainted for some time, Doreen and Michael began dating, and a few months later, they chose to get married. In 1976, they had a son named Paul. At first, Michael and Doreen's life was very happy, but after having a child, their relationship began to experience difficulties. After approximately a year, Doreen and Michael decided to divorce. Their son was raised by Doreen, while Michael was still permitted to visit him regularly. Despite the divorce, Michael and Doreen maintained a cordial relationship. A year later, Doreen met a man named Charles. They started dating, got married, and decided to move to San Jose, settling in a quiet residential neighborhood. In 1979, their daughter Deanna was born. Charles, like his wife, dreamed of having a large family. He was overjoyed when their daughter arrived. However, tragedy struck the family in February 1980. 4-year-old Paul climbed over the fence surrounding the pool and fell into the water. Doreen, who was at home at the time, realized what had occurred too late. She pulled her son from the water and called an ambulance. Paul was transported to the hospital and placed on life support. However, after 10 days, doctors determined that there was no chance of survival. The decision was made to remove the boy from the machines. Doreen became depressed and devastated, blaming herself continuously, even though the police concluded that it was not her fault. Nevertheless, Doreen's young daughter Deanna helped her cope with this pain. For years after the tragic event, Doreen's family finally received some good news. Doreen and Charles had been trying for another child, though they had failed twice due to interrupted pregnancies. But Doreen eventually became pregnant again, and this time, everything progressed smoothly. They were expecting a baby boy due in early November. A few days before Doreen was to be admitted to the hospital, her family decided to participate in the Halloween celebrations. On the evening of October 31st, all the neighbors decorated their homes and distributed candy to the children. Deanna, who was 4 years old at the time, was very eager to join in, and her parents could not refuse. Although Doreen was 9 months pregnant, she went trick-or-treating with her daughter while Charles stayed home, giving out candy to other children. The mother and daughter returned home just before 9 p.m. Charles informed his wife that they were running low on candy and that he planned to drive to the nearest store to buy more. He left the house around 8:50 p.m. and returned about 15 minutes later. As he approached the house, Charles noticed that the front door was slightly ajar, which struck him as unusual. Upon entering, he found his wife lying on the hallway floor, surrounded by a large amount of blood. Doreen showed no signs of life, and Charles immediately called 911. Shortly after, he noticed the body of their unborn child in the living room. Charles was in shock, unable to believe what he was witnessing. At first, he thought Doreen might have suffered a miscarriage, but he quickly realized that the situation was far worse. Beside the child lay a human hand, and Charles immediately understood that it belonged to Doreen. When Charles realized that his family had been attacked, he began searching for Deanna, fearing she might be in danger. He saw so much blood on the floor that he slipped and fell while running through the house. Fortunately, Deanna was still alive, hiding behind the sofa in the living room out of fear. When the ambulance arrived, paramedics found Doreen and discovered that she had a weak pulse. They rushed her to the hospital, but unfortunately, doctors were unable to save her, and she died in the ambulance. Tragically, Doreen's unborn child also died as a result of the brutal attack. Medical experts examined Doreen's body and determined that she had been repeatedly struck with a long, sharp object, such as a sword or machete. The police investigated the house and encountered a horrifying scene that resembled something out of a horror movie. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, on the walls, and even on the ceiling. Several police officers sought psychological help after witnessing the horrific scene. Investigators searched the entire house, but found no perpetrator or any clues about the attacker. While examining the murder scene, police discovered significant evidence outside the house. They observed bloody footprints on the sidewalk and suspected that the killer had left the scene in a vehicle. During their search for more clues, police found a blood-stained wolf mask on the front lawn. They believed the mask might have belonged to the killer, as family members stated they had never owned it. The mask was sent to a lab for analysis. Police then spoke to Deanna, the only surviving child from the attack. She was in shock but still able to speak. She told police that after her father left for the store, someone knocked on their door. Her mother, Doreen, opened the door and saw a man wearing a wolf mask and holding a knife. The attacker said, "I'm going to kill you now." Doreen screamed, instructing her daughter to run away from the house immediately. Deanna hid behind the sofa, but could not remember what happened next. It was not until her father found her that Deanna calmed down. Unfortunately, Deanna could not provide any further information about the attacker, as he had concealed his identity behind the wolf mask. Investigators initially suspected Doreen's husband, Charles, as the prime suspect. Since he had been out of the house at the time of the attack, they were suspicious of his trip to the store. When Charles returned, he had stepped in blood multiple times and even slipped, ending up covered in it. However, the police did not know whether he had done this intentionally to explain the bloodstains on his clothes. Detectives soon found several issues with this theory. First, Charles's shoes did not match the footprints left in blood on the road. Second, no traces of blood were found in Charles's car, nor were there any other shoe prints. To verify the information, police went to the store Charles had visited and confirmed the time he had been there. The employee confirmed that Charles had purchased candy at the store that evening, indicating that he did not have enough time to commit the murder. Surveillance footage also confirmed that Charles was at the store. Consequently, the police no longer considered him the prime suspect. They first asked Charles if he could think of anyone who might wish to harm his family, and Charles immediately mentioned Doreen's ex-husband, Michael. Charles explained that initially, Michael had maintained a normal relationship with his ex-wife. However, things changed after the death of their son. Michael believed that Doreen had intentionally killed the child to sever all contact with him. Michael even filed a civil lawsuit against her, but lost the case. Doreen thought there was a reason behind Michael's change in behavior. He had experienced depression after the birth of his son and had become distant from both his wife and child. All of this made Michael introverted and caused communication problems. These problems were among the main reasons why Michael and Doreen decided to divorce. Later, when Doreen married Charles, Michael began to harbor resentment and hostility toward her. This became even more pronounced as Michael's hatred for his ex-wife grew. Later, Michael lost his job at the place where he had spent most of his life, creating additional negative issues in his life. After learning all this information, detectives decided to go to Michael's house to speak with him. Although Charles's testimony was not sufficient to make Michael the prime suspect, since he lived only 2 miles from Doreen's house, the police decided to visit him immediately. Around midnight, officers arrived at Michael's house and noticed a pickup truck parked near the garage. When they shined a flashlight inside the vehicle, they observed what appeared to be blood on the steering wheel and keys. They then knocked on Michael's door, but there was no answer. The lights were on inside the house, and the police could hear water running, which made them suspect that Michael might be destroying evidence or washing bloody clothes. They continued knocking, and Michael finally opened the door. He remained calm even after being informed of his ex-wife's murder. Michael answered all the police's questions calmly and allowed them into his home without a warrant. According to him, he had gone to the store during the day, returned home, and had not left since. Michael even signed a form giving the police permission to search his house. As he reached for a pen to sign, investigators noticed a deep cut on his right hand. Michael explained that he had accidentally cut himself earlier while carving pumpkins for Halloween. However, the police were skeptical, as the wound was still fresh and blood was still flowing from it. As several officers began searching Michael's home, he was asked to go upstairs with an officer to show his identification. However, when he entered the bedroom, his actions aroused suspicion as he appeared to be reaching under the bed. The officer instructed him to step aside and discovered a loaded gun holster under the headboard. After finding the weapon, police took Michael downstairs to meet with other officers. Their colleagues discovered additional suspicious evidence, including drops of blood on the floor, which led them to the garage, where a washing machine and bloody clothing were found. Based on this evidence, the police had sufficient grounds to arrest Michael. Detectives and forensic experts investigated Michael's home further, searching for more evidence that could connect him to the murder. Police awaited the results of blood analysis and discovered other grisly signs. Initially, they found an empty box containing an 18-inch machete. Medical experts determined that the shape of the knife matched the wound on Doreen's body perfectly. Additionally, police found 2 makeshift coffins in Michael's home, raising suspicions that they might have been intended for Doreen and Charles. They also discovered mortuary bags, the type typically used by paramedics, in Michael's home. The presence of these items made the police question Michael's innocence. After compiling all this evidence, the police decided to apply for a warrant for Michael's arrest. Without a warrant, they could only detain him for a limited period. However, the judge stated that the evidence gathered was not strong enough, and that many unknowns remained. As a result, Michael was released and freed. 3 days into the investigation, detectives received lab results showing 2 different blood types at the crime scene. The majority of the blood matched Doreen's blood type, while a small amount matched Michael's. This indicated that Michael had injured himself during the attack on his ex-wife. The judge quickly issued an arrest warrant, and Michael was charged with the murder of his ex-wife and her unborn child. Detectives continued their investigation and uncovered additional evidence linking Michael to the crime. When they spoke to Michael's acquaintances, they learned that he owned the wolf mask found near Doreen's house. They also found a photograph of Michael wearing the mask at a previous Halloween party. To further solidify the case, police recovered the mask Michael had worn in the photo from his home. Michael's trial began in July 1988, years after Doreen's murder. He initially admitted to the crime, but later altered his story. He did not deny committing the murder, but claimed he was innocent by reason of mental illness. A psychologist assigned to monitor him concluded that he did indeed suffer from serious mental illness. According to Michael, he became insane on Halloween night when he saw other children trick-or-treating. This reminded him of Paul's death and caused him to collapse. He stated that he went to Doreen's house that night carrying a machete. When she opened the door, he said, "You killed my son," and that he intended to kill her. She immediately recognized the man behind the mask and shouted at her daughter to run. In the next moment, Michael attacked her. However, Michael's account contained one twist. He claimed he did not know that Doreen was pregnant. This raised suspicions, as all her friends stated that she had been clearly pregnant before the tragedy. They even joked that Doreen had grown larger because of her pregnancy. The murder of Doreen and her unborn child was revealed during the trial. The prosecution argued that Michael was fully aware of his actions and had planned to kill his ex-wife and her husband. He had told friends about this intent, and detectives found evidence that he had made detailed preparations, including 2 coffins and body bags, in his home. However, it appeared that he changed his mind and did not fully carry out his murder plan. This led the prosecution to suspect that he may have feared being caught or discovered. One of the key witnesses in the case was Doreen's daughter, Deanna. She was only 9 years old at the time and still remembered what had happened. After a year of investigation and trial, Michael was convicted of murder. He was sentenced to death, but before the execution could be carried out, the state of California imposed a moratorium on executions. Therefore, Michael remains in custody, and his sentence may not be carried out anytime soon. The case left a profound mark on Deanna's life. Years later, she continued to be haunted by the horrific memories of her mother's death. However, she chose to forgive Michael and attempt to move past the trauma. Moving on to the next case. Jean-Pierre IV. Jean-Pierre IV and Beatrice Frustieri experienced serious difficulties in their marriage, which ultimately led them to conclude that divorce was the only option. Beatrice admitted that IV was the sole love of her life, and she had always believed that this would never change. When they initially fell in love, they were a happy couple, spending all of their free time together. They later had a daughter named Angelica. Beatrice often said that her husband, Far, was hot-tempered. However, she herself was an active, lively, and attractive person. After roughly 20 years of living together, they knew each other extremely well. However, their relatives and friends may have noticed that their relationship was deteriorating. Although they remained together, the mutual understanding they once shared had disappeared. Beatrice frequently complained about her husband, blaming him for being temperamental, something she had loved when she first met him, which now became a reason for her discomfort. However, Beatrice was not a flawless person, and this was often mentioned by Four's family. She was very active, loved attending parties, and often dressed in a way that showed off her beauty. However, Four and his family believed that she did this not only for herself or for Four, but also to attract attention from other men. A man named Jean-Claude Duillery became a close friend of the family. He claimed to have met Four during their teenage years, and the two had become close friends, growing up in the same neighborhood. Their relationship was so close that Four even secured Duillery a job at his father's company. Before the tragic incident occurred, Duillery was invited to help build a hill in the backyard of Four and Beatrice's home. During this period, he developed a close relationship with their family, visiting them daily and working alongside them. Their friendship grew stronger, and the trio often celebrated holidays and special occasions together. Around the time of Four and Beatrice's divorce in 2005, he grew closer to them, visiting frequently and bringing wine with him each time. Four's daughter, Angelica, noticed that Duillery was persistently trying to get her father drunk. His behavior was so excessive that she began to suspect he was doing it intentionally, possibly to spend time alone with Beatrice. Her suspicions were not without basis. Over time, as tensions within the family increased, the situation worsened. Four eventually discovered that Beatrice had been unfaithful to him, which prompted him to seek a divorce. During this period, Duillery quickly became Beatrice's new lover. However, no one was surprised because she had officially separated from her husband, Four. All that remained was to complete the administrative procedures for their divorce. During this time, Beatrice sought emotional support and received comfort from Duillery. Meanwhile, Four appeared to have given up all hope of reconciling with Beatrice or saving their marriage. He became furious, and tensions within the family continued to rise. In addition, Duillery grew closer to Beatrice as she worked through the divorce proceedings. This situation lasted until the night of March 16, 2005, when Four suddenly and mysteriously disappeared. 2 days later, Four's daughter, Angelica, reported him missing to the gendarmerie. She stated that her father had no intention of going anywhere, especially since her parents were in the middle of a court battle over property division and child custody. Four rarely left his home except for work. He was a private person and had no plans to travel far, something Angelica knew very well. After receiving the report, detectives began investigating, but he seemed to have vanished without a trace. A search of the house revealed no clues, making it difficult to determine where to start the search. The investigators then turned their attention to Four's close circle of acquaintances. Beatrice and Duillery naturally attracted the most scrutiny. During questioning, Beatrice cried frequently, but often provided unclear or rambling answers. Her testimony was often contradictory, yet she consistently insisted that she had nothing to do with her husband Four's disappearance. Although her behavior raised investigators' suspicions, they were unable to obtain a confession from her. 2 weeks after Four went missing, a purchase was made in his name using his bank account. A car had been bought and was immediately placed on the wanted list. The vehicle was quickly located through CCTV footage, which showed that it had been driven to Four's residence immediately after the purchase. The entire building was thoroughly searched. The car was later discovered burned out in the basement of the building where Duillery worked, which was still under construction. It appeared that someone had attempted to destroy evidence, but the burning of the car had not been completely successful. Investigators found critical evidence inside the vehicle, including a bloody towel in the trunk. DNA analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Four. Similar traces were also discovered inside the car, particularly on the back seat, indicating that Four had been inside the vehicle and had sustained serious injuries. Based on the quantity of blood found on the towel and inside the car, it was likely that Four had died from his wounds. He had been locked inside the trunk of a car that had been purchased in his own name and with his own money. This discovery prompted authorities to launch an official investigation into the possibility that Four had been kidnapped and murdered. Police also began wiretapping conversations. Beatrice and Duillery, who were now not only dating but also living together, were residing in Four's house. Detectives quickly obtained disturbing audio recordings of their conversations, in which they spoke ill of Four. On April 6, 2005, both were arrested and taken into custody. During a preliminary hearing, Beatrice and Duillery admitted that they had been lovers for a long time, but denied any involvement in the murder. Four's body had yet to be recovered, complicating the investigation. While in prison, Duillery wrote letters to the court and investigators, attempting to prove his innocence. He claimed to have been a victim of Beatrice and described his relationship with her as a major mistake. After 10 months in custody, Beatrice was released on bail, but Duillery remained imprisoned. At that time, The investigation had not yet found any evidence linking Beatrice to the murder, and Four's body was still missing. Eventually, she went to the police to disclose what had truly occurred. On November 14, 2007, Beatrice appeared in court. All of her family members were present to support her, especially her daughter Angelica, who appeared very nervous. In court, she revealed that she knew the location where her husband, Four, was buried. This disclosure shocked his family. She stated that she would be willing to show them the burial site, so the trial was adjourned to allow an investigation to verify this critical information. Beatrice stood on the rocky ledge of Cap Canal, surrounded by police. This location is well known in investigative circles for its dangerous reputation. Several times during searches at the site, bodies had been discovered at the foot of the cliff. This time, the remains were found wearing blue sweatpants, identical to those worn by Four. Four's family confirmed that the remains were his and sent them to the forensic laboratory. Unfortunately, the body was too damaged to determine the exact cause of death or the full extent of injuries. Most details of the incident had to rely on Beatrice's account. Curiously, the police discovered the remains of two different individuals at the base of the cliff. There were two skulls and several bone fragments scattered nearby. In addition to some pieces of clothing, authorities recovered a gold ring, a pair of earrings, and a bracelet. Some of these items were identified as belonging to Four. While it was initially unclear who the second set of remains belonged to, it was later identified as Dominique Ortiz, a young woman. Her presence at the site was no coincidence. She had been the fiancée of Delieri. She had gone missing in Marseille in 2001. This raised significant questions about the circumstances of her death and her connection to Four. Delieri, Four's friend, had made a poor impression from the beginning. He was a stern and gruff man, and his appearance was further marked by a scar on his face, which he claimed was the result of a motorbike accident many years prior. Four's younger sister filed a police complaint, stating that she had suffered daily abuse from her brother. Things escalated when he injured her thigh. During the trial, he denied these allegations, yet family and friends described him as a master manipulator. While he initially appeared pleasant and calm, he was in reality controlling, jealous, and aggressive. Naturally, when the remains of Dominique and Four were discovered and linked to him, the authorities dismissed any notion that this was mere coincidence. Authorities suspected that Delieri, a 39-year-old mason from Marseille, had killed his fiancée Dominique by pushing her off a cliff. He then attacked his friend, Four, and planned to dispose of the body in the same location. Prosecutors argued that the motive was rooted in jealousy and a love triangle. This drove him to attack Four, whom he saw as a rival. His primary goal was to eliminate Four to ensure that the woman he loved, Beatrice, would not have to share her daughter or her fortune with Four. Beatrice, 41, accused her lover, Delieri, of committing a brutal crime. According to her account, the incident occurred on the night of the 16th, when she returned home late after an evening shopping trip. Upon entering her home, she was confronted by a grisly scene in the kitchen. This took place just days before her divorce proceedings were scheduled to begin. She recounted that upon entering the house, she found Delieri standing over Four's body, which lay face down with a fatal head wound, likely caused by a blow from behind. Beatrice described Four as seriously injured and near death. Delieri was holding a large kitchen knife, the type typically used for cutting meat. One of the kitchen windows had been shattered, with glass shards stained with blood scattered across the floor. She wanted to call for help, but Delieri prevented her. When she questioned him about what had happened, his behavior was erratic, and he curtly responded that the fewer questions she asked, the fewer problems they would have. During this time, Four succumbed to his injuries. Beatrice asked Delieri to call the police and report the incident. Instead, he approached her with a knife in hand, threatening her while staring directly at her. Realizing the danger, she backed away and followed his orders. He then threw a towel over Four's head and asked for her assistance. With no other option, she was forced to help dispose of the body. They used a plastic bag to cover Four's broken head to contain the bleeding. Beatrice explained that the body was dragged to an unfinished building and left in the basement behind stacks of construction materials. Terrified and under the threat of death, she felt compelled to comply. Using a newly acquired vehicle, they drove toward Cap Canal, where they pushed the body off a ledge. She recounted hearing a dull thud as Four's body struck the rocks below. Delieri then approached her, and she feared he might push her down as well. To her surprise, rather than killing her, he led her to the car. Before allowing her to get in, he violently grabbed her shoulders, shook her angrily, and demanded to know what she thought about what had happened. Beatrice, too shocked to respond, believed that she would inevitably become Dullieri's next victim. He then forced her into the car. During the entire ride, she was terrified, uncertain of their destination or what would happen to her. To her surprise, they returned to her house. From that moment, he moved in with her. He kept her under constant surveillance, never allowing her to leave his side. She was only permitted to open the door in his presence, and he forbade her from using her cell phone privately. He even followed her into the bathroom to ensure she did not report him to the authorities. She lived in extreme fear and was unable to provide any clarification to the investigation. Shortly after moving in, Dullieri disposed of Four's belongings. He also forced Beatrice to help clean the house of any traces of blood. They cleaned everything together. Beatrice later stated that she had been under immense pressure the entire time, leaving her unable to resist or report the murder to the police. She gradually realized that he was a true monster. All his terrifying aspects were revealed during this period. When Dullieri learned of her confession, he immediately dismissed her account and called her a liar. Even the lawyer representing Four in the divorce case doubted her testimony. According to the lawyer, shortly before his death, Four had described his wife, Beatrice, as a manipulator and a cheater. He claimed he simply wanted to end their toxic relationship as quickly as possible. The prosecutor's office agreed with this account. They argued that Beatrice was at least an accomplice, or even an active participant in the massacre. During her initial interrogation, she had the opportunity to tell the police what had happened, but she did not. She was clearly unhappy that he wanted to end their relationship and had a motive for the murder. Beatrice's daughter, Angelica, continued to stand by her mother, while Four's family took a completely different view. The situation had caused family conflict even before the trial began. By the time the hearing started, Angelica and her grandparents were on opposing sides. Both families braced themselves for a confrontation, the outcome of which could determine the freedom of one or both of the criminals, Beatrice and Dullieri. In any case, it took time to verify the new testimony. The hearing resumed on September 15, 2008. By this time, the relationship between the two families had become even more tense and hostile. Angelica's grandparents alleged that Beatrice's lies were the reason Angelica had turned against the family. Both Beatrice and Dullieri faced the risk of life imprisonment. The prosecutor's office sought to prove that they were both involved in Four's murder. Many experts from different fields were invited to attend this high-level trial to clarify the truth. Since the remains could not provide enough information, additional experts were needed to collect as much data as possible to help the jury reach a fair and objective conclusion. Forensic psychiatrists analyzed Beatrice and Dullieri's psychological profiles, which cast further doubt on Beatrice's story. Compared to Dullieri, she appeared unusually anxious. They repeatedly blamed each other and accused each other of lying. Dullieri even argued that the body found was not Four's. However, this claim was invalidated as DNA testing confirmed that the remains were indeed Four's. During the hearing, a forensic expert testified to clarify key questions. The expert identified 3 serious injuries to Four's skull, located on the back of the head and the crown. The force and placement of these injuries aligned with Beatrice's account of the incident. According to the expert, the attacker struck Four from behind, delivering multiple powerful blows and killing him. These details seemed to fit Dullieri, who was physically weaker than Four. Not having the strength to face him directly, Dullieri took the opportunity to attack from behind. To support the expert's argument, the prosecution presented Four's skull and some of his bones. They showed signs of trauma and cuts on the bones. For Four's family, this presentation was very painful, but it was considered necessary for the case. In addition, the prosecutor's office used another skeleton while investigating the possibility that Dullieri was involved in the murder of Dominique, who was found near Four's body. All of the above evidence was carefully arranged and labeled in boxes, then brought to the hearing. After the hearings, it was discovered that Dominique's father had been trying for a long time to retrieve his daughter's body and bury her. However, he was unable to do so because law enforcement agencies had difficulty completing the relevant procedures. At the same time, her remains had been examined by forensic experts for a long period in the lab. This caused him great pain, leading him to be angry and curse Dullieri. When both sides presented their arguments, The prosecutor requested a 20-year sentence for Beatrice and a 30-year sentence for Dalieri. While the jury deliberated, the media interviewed Dalieri, who maintained his innocence and expressed a desire for the ordeal to end quickly. He claimed that he had been wrongly imprisoned for 3.5 years and did not want to spend the following years of his life in prison. Despite her hopes, the jury upheld Dalieri's conviction. The court sentenced the defendants to the exact terms requested by the prosecutor: 20 years for Beatrice and 30 years for Dalieri. Four's family was largely satisfied with the verdict, but they argued that Beatrice deserved a harsher punishment, believing she had not only helped clean up the crime scene, but had played a much more significant role in the massacre. In their view, she should have received a 30-year sentence. However, Beatrice's parents and daughter strongly opposed this. While in prison, Beatrice filed an appeal and placed high hopes on her lawyer. On the morning before the hearing, her lawyer continued to speak to the media, expressing confidence that they could win the appeal, especially since the case had attracted so much public attention. Beatrice appeared in the courtroom alongside Dalieri. From the outset, her behavior did not favor her. She arrived wearing an overly flashy outfit, bright makeup, and a festive hairstyle, as if preparing for a celebration rather than attending a court hearing regarding her spouse's death. Typically, defendants choose simple clothing to avoid being negatively evaluated by the jury. However, she made it seem like this was a happy occasion. The defense focused on emphasizing that the prosecution's allegations lacked direct evidence. Even the forensic team had difficulty identifying Four's body, let alone reconstructing the incident leading to his death. The prosecutor, however, concentrated on Beatrice's own account of the incident. As in previous hearings, Beatrice's daughter, Angelica, was present to support her mother, focusing all her efforts on rescuing her from prison. By this point, the prosecution had obtained recordings of phone conversations between Beatrice and Dalieri made just 3 weeks after Four's death. These recordings were played in court and contradicted Beatrice's testimony that she was threatened by Dalieri. Instead, she appeared to be a manipulator. Beatrice's daughter, Angelica, defended her mother, claiming that she had been abused by Dalieri, proving that she could not have been complicit in the crime. According to Angelica, her mother had fallen into a state of depression and fear and had been forced by Dalieri to help hide the body and the evidence. During the hearings, Beatrice's former boss also testified. He denied having had an extramarital affair with her, but spoke highly of her, describing her as a reliable and professional employee. According to him, Beatrice was not manipulative, but gentle and never cruel. Later, Beatrice took the stand herself, offering lengthy and convoluted explanations filled with irrelevant details. A forensic psychiatrist analyzed her behavior, describing her as frightened and desperate. She vehemently defended herself, accusing everyone, including Four's relatives, of neglecting him for years. She claimed that no one loved him as she did. This accusation outraged Four's family, who found it offensive. His mother called Beatrice a bad person, willing to put others down to avoid jail. The bitter confrontation between Beatrice and Four's family added to the tension. Four's father, Robert, accused Beatrice of orchestrating the murder. He argued that forensic evidence showed his son had put up a strong fight against his attackers and firmly believed that Dalieri alone was not strong enough to overpower Four, suggesting that both perpetrators had worked together to commit the crime. Meanwhile, Four's mother highlighted Beatrice's supposed immoral behavior to the jury. Her harsh remarks caused Angelica, Beatrice's daughter, to lose her temper. Angelica's behavior in court became so disruptive that she was warned she could be removed from the courtroom. She also accused Dalieri of manipulating her mother. Dalieri, in turn, claimed that Beatrice had manipulated him, leading him astray and ultimately causing him to be sentenced to 30 years in prison. However, his claim was not given much weight, as the prosecutor's office was firmly convinced that both Dalieri and Beatrice had acted together in committing the crime. The prosecutor then presented a crucial piece of evidence, asserting that Beatrice had conspired in the murder. This was supported by the purchase of a new car, which had supposedly been bought by Four. In reality, Beatrice was the purchaser, and the car was allegedly obtained in advance to facilitate the disposal of Four's body. With this new evidence, the prosecutors requested that Beatrice's sentence be extended. Her lawyer argued that she had purchased the car under duress from Dalieri, who had been planning to kill Four out of jealousy for some time. In her final statement, Beatrice maintained her innocence, denying any involvement in Four's murder and insisting that, Despite their conflicts, she had no motive to kill him. The trial lasted 3 days. After all testimonies and arguments were presented, the chief prosecutor requested a 30-year prison sentence for both Beatrice Frustieri and Jean-Claude Dullieri. The jury deliberated for over 4 hours before returning to deliver their verdict. They upheld Beatrice's 20-year sentence, reaffirming her guilt. For's family was disappointed once again, having hoped for a harsher punishment. Dullieri's sentence was also reviewed, and his prison term was reduced by 5 years, despite objections from For's family. For the Dominique Ortiz case, Dullieri received a 20-year sentence to run concurrently with his other sentence. Beatrice and Dullieri were sent back to prison, though the precise roles each played in the crimes remain a matter of controversy. Moving on to the next case. The case of Kathleen Dorset. Kathleen Dorset, who was born on July 2, 1974, works as a teacher at Gable School in Neptune Township, New Jersey. She wed Stephen Moore in June 2007. Stephen was employed in sales at a nearby Honda dealership and had formerly been a speed skater. After being married for a year and a half, they welcomed their daughter, Elizabeth. However, their joy was short-lived as disagreements over parenting began to surface. Stephen also told his friends that Kathleen's parents, Thomas and Leslie Dorset, were repeatedly intruding in his and his wife's lives, to the extent that they would frequently arrive at their home without notice. When Elizabeth was 10 months old, Stephen chose to move out to live with his mother and filed for divorce. A custody dispute soon followed. Eventually, the divorce was finalized in June 2010, with Kathleen receiving primary custody. Following the divorce, Kathleen's parents planned to relocate to Florida with her and Elizabeth. They also wanted to make sure that Stephen would still be able to see Elizabeth, so they intended to help him move there as well, including Thomas agreeing to give Stephen financial support for the first 6 months after the relocation. On August 16, 2010, Stephen brought his daughter to Kathleen's parents' home in Oakhurst, New Jersey. However, after handing over their daughter, Stephen was killed by Thomas right in the driveway of the house, while Kathleen was reportedly inside changing their daughter's diaper. That same day, Stephen failed to show up for work at the Honda dealership, and his employer reported him missing. 2 days later, on August 18, 2010, Stephen's body was discovered behind his mother's 2001 Nissan Altima, which was burning in Long Branch, New Jersey. While cooperating with police, Kathleen stated that she last saw Stephen at 7:45 a.m. on August 16, when he came for the custody exchange, and that she had not seen him afterward. However, she was unaware that Stephen had kept a diary documenting their problems in the weeks leading up to his death. According to Stephen's divorce attorney, Veronica Davis, Kathleen often exercised strict control over each visit Stephen had with their daughter. She not only gave him a handwritten schedule, but also called multiple times during the allotted periods. This prompted Stephen to decide to push back and seek additional time with his daughter. Stephen also recorded voicemails from Kathleen. The recordings and messages Stephen preserved later became key evidence, helping investigators identify Kathleen as a suspect in his death. As the investigation broadened, authorities returned to search Kathleen's home and found blood on some of the house's siding. This discovery raised suspicions that a crime had taken place inside the home. In addition, statements from 2 neighbors revealed that they heard screaming on the morning Stephen went missing, further supporting major clues in the case. On August 23rd, Kathleen was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and fourth-degree tampering with evidence. However, investigators believed she had not acted alone. Just 1 day after Kathleen's arrest, her father, Thomas, was found unconscious in the parking lot outside his law office. He drank 30 pounds of refrigerant in an attempt to take his own life, but he survived. After regaining consciousness, he was charged with first-degree murder and 2 counts of fourth-degree tampering with evidence. Surveillance footage from the morning of Stephen's disappearance showed Thomas driving the vehicle Stephen had used, while Kathleen followed behind in her own car. Thomas later returned to the landfill in his work truck and disposed of a dumpster containing tarps, ropes, and wood. Authorities believe Kathleen lured Stephen down the driveway under the guise of retrieving some tools from the basement. There, Thomas concealed himself in the bushes and attacked Stephen, striking him in the face before strangling him to death with a rope. Another man, Anthony Morris, was charged with arson and desecration of human remains. Anthony was alleged to have been paid $3,000 by Thomas to burn Stephen's mother's car, with his body inside the trunk. Because of the serious charges brought against Kathleen and Thomas, they were detained at Monmouth County Jail, with bail set at $1.5 million and $2.5 million respectively. While Kathleen and Thomas were in custody, a judge awarded custody of Elizabeth to Evelyn Moore, who was Stephen's mother. This ruling enraged Kathleen. Just 4 months after her husband's death, she devised a vicious plan, directing her mother, Leslie, to bring $1,000 in cash to hire a hitman to murder Evelyn. However, they did not realize that the plot had already been discovered. One of Kathleen's cellmates, Alice Anderson, reported the scheme to the prosecutor's office. Authorities then arranged for Leslie to meet with an undercover detective who was posing as a hitman. Leslie was arrested shortly after the exchange and was jailed along with Kathleen and Thomas. While awaiting trial, Kathleen and Leslie were charged with conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Further investigation revealed that the family had been involved in money laundering activities, having attempted to hide $96,000 in assets to avoid detection. In November 2010, the entire family, including Kathleen, Thomas, and Leslie, was charged with money laundering. By April 2011, Anthony Morris, who had been hired to burn Stephen's car and body, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to disturb or desecrate human remains. As part of a plea agreement, Anthony was sentenced to less than 7 years in prison. In May 2013, Kathleen, Thomas, and Leslie appeared in court facing charges connected to Stephen's murder. During the trial, Kathleen testified that on the day of the incident, she had led Stephen to the backyard where her father, Thomas, was waiting to carry out the violent plan. While changing her daughter's diaper, she heard Stephen screaming for help. However, instead of running outside to help her husband, she continued what she was doing, aware that her father was attacking him with a heavy cable. After Stephen was killed, she went outside to assist her father in placing his body into the trunk of the car. Thomas Dorset, who was 66 years old at the time, quickly pleaded guilty shortly after his daughter. In court, Thomas testified that he had argued with Stephen before hitting him in the head with the cable, causing instant death. Afterwards, Thomas and his daughter placed Stephen's body in the trunk, drove to Long Branch, and had Anthony Morris burn the car with the body inside the following day to destroy evidence. During the trial, attorneys and defendants disclosed the reasons that led up to the tragedy. After several years of marriage, Kathleen often confided in her father that her marriage was failing and that she did not think Stephen was capable of properly providing for the family. Thomas, who had financially supported his daughter's family and helped care for his granddaughter, grew increasingly hostile toward Stephen. In his testimony, Thomas admitted that he had previously considered poisoning or killing Stephen. Tensions escalated when the divorce agreement required Thomas to financially support Stephen, including assisting him in finding new housing, which further strained their relationship. Ultimately, all 3 members of the Dorset family received lengthy sentences. Kathleen Dorset was sentenced to 30 years in prison for murder, 20 years for attempted murder, and 8 years for conspiracy, to be served consecutively. She is currently serving her sentence at the Edna Mahone Correctional Facility for Women in Union Township, New Jersey, and will be eligible for parole in August 2057, when she is 83 years old. Following her imprisonment, the New Jersey Department of Education revoked her teaching license. Thomas Dorset was sentenced to 30 years for murder and 15 years for conspiracy to commit arson. He is now serving his sentence at New Jersey State Prison in Trenton, New Jersey, and will be eligible for parole in August 2040 when he is 93 years old. Leslie Dorset, Kathleen's mother, was also sentenced to 7 years for conspiracy to commit murder. Like her daughter, she was incarcerated at the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women. She became eligible for parole in December 2016 and has since been released. The case left devastating consequences for Stephen's family. Following Stephen's death, his mother, Evelyn Moore, was granted custody of her granddaughter Elizabeth until she passed away in 2021 at the age of 86. Elizabeth now lives with other family members, in accordance with Stephen's wishes. The tragedy not only took Stephen's life, but also destroyed many family relationships and left enduring grief. Moving on to the next case. The case of Katrina Ashley Edland Smith. Katrina Ashley Edland was born on July 16, 1982, to her mother Vicky. She had two siblings, an older brother named Chad and a younger sister named Miranda, who looked up to Katrina as a role model. As children, Miranda would often try on Katrina's clothes and use her makeup, admiring her older sister and wanting to be just like her. As the years passed, Katrina and Miranda formed a strong bond, becoming more like best friends than sisters. Katrina grew up in Musney Park, Illinois, a suburban community outside the city, after her parents separated and she lived with her mother. Those who knew Katrina described her as a kind, fun-loving person who cherished the holiday season and enjoyed giving humorous gifts to her friends and family. She was deeply involved in her church and had a strong desire to help others, always willing to lend a hand to those in need. Despite her happiness, Katrina longed to find love and thought she had found it when she met Todd Smith at a bar when she was 20 years old. Todd, a self-employed financial planner, had 3 daughters and worked from home. He met Katrina, and despite their differences, they clicked. Todd's flexible schedule allowed them to travel frequently. After 3 years together, Todd proposed to Katrina, and she happily accepted. They planned a small wedding in a local park, and Katrina was thrilled about their future. She loved Todd's daughters and was eager to build a life with him. Katrina's family, including her mother Vicky and siblings Chad and Miranda, adored Todd and thought he was an excellent match for Katrina. They trusted him to take care of her and believed the couple was meant to be. After marrying, Katrina and Todd settled in Musney Park and started their new life together. On October 20th, 2012, Katrina, 30, called her mother and said she was house-sitting for a friend. During their conversation, she mentioned she would visit for dinner on October 24th and had news to share. Vicky suspected that something was amiss, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Before ending their phone call, Vicky promised Katrina that she would cook her favorite meal, chicken and dumplings. Tragically, Vicky would never get the chance to keep that promise. Days later, Katrina vanished, and Vicky would never lay eyes on her again. On October 23rd, at 5 p.m., Todd, Katrina's husband, called 911 to report her disappearance. He told the dispatcher that Katrina was house-sitting for a friend and that he had been trying to reach her for hours without success. When he drove to the house, he found it empty. Katrina's siblings, Miranda and Chad, were alarmed when they heard the news. Chad, who was undergoing military training in Oklahoma, immediately flew to Illinois to help search for his sister. On the evening of the 23rd, a concerned citizen notified the police about an abandoned vehicle near Rock River. The caller reported that the car was not parked on the road, but rather in an easement, suggesting it had been hastily abandoned. When authorities arrived to investigate, they ran the license plate and identified it as belonging to Katrina Smith. Upon inspecting the vehicle, the officer found no signs of a struggle or any trace of Katrina herself. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was adamant that her daughter's disappearance was a clear indication of foul play when she learned that Katrina's car had been abandoned in an unfamiliar area. It was the only logical explanation to Vicky. If Katrina's car was found in that location, someone must have taken her and left the car there. Following the discovery of her car, Katrina's case was officially categorized as a missing person, and the search efforts intensified significantly. On October 12th at 11 p.m., the police took Todd Smith in for a formal interview at the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. During the interview, Todd told the detective that he last saw his wife Katrina on October 10th, not October 22nd. He stated that Katrina had come home briefly to do laundry in preparation for a big job interview the following day. According to Todd, while the laundry was in progress, Katrina left to go to the mall to make a purchase and returned home at 8:30 p.m. Todd reported that Katrina briefly returned home before leaving again to make one last stop. She had told him she needed to complete an errand before returning to the house she was watching for a friend. The next day, after Katrina was declared missing, Todd made an emotional appeal to the media, pleading for her safe return. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears as he begged for anyone with information about her whereabouts to come forward. As the search for Katrina continued, search teams composed of officers and volunteers worked tirelessly to find her. They focused their efforts on a nearby park where Katrina's car had been abandoned, hoping to find evidence or clues about her disappearance. When Katrina's brother Chad arrived in Illinois from his Army training in Oklahoma, he joined the search for his missing sister at the park. With his military background, Chad took charge of the search party. He created a map, divided the volunteers into teams, and coordinated their efforts to ensure a thorough search. As the search continued, the officers employed a methodical approach, using dogs and walking in straight lines to cover as much ground as possible and detect any potential evidence, no matter how small. Meanwhile, Katrina's mother, Vicky, focused on spreading awareness about her daughter's disappearance. She posted missing person flyers at gas stations, convenience stores, and lamp posts throughout the town, hoping to reach as many people as possible. Despite her overwhelming grief and fear of finding her daughter's body, Vicky was determined to keep searching for Katrina, even if she couldn't participate in the physical search herself. Todd, Katrina's husband, was overcome with emotion during this difficult time. Chad, trying to be supportive, urged Todd to stay strong and focused on finding Katrina. He stood by Todd's side, sympathetic to his brother-in-law's grief. Meanwhile, the police investigation turned up some disturbing clues. An officer found Katrina's purse near her abandoned car, and as he searched further down the road, he discovered more of her belongings, including her cell phone and bloody towels. It was clear that someone had deliberately discarded Katrina's possessions as they drove away from her car. Unfortunately, the police still had no idea where Katrina was, but they feared the worst. The recovered items were sent to the crime lab for analysis, and the police awaited the results with bated breath. As the police searched for clues, they explored every aspect of Katrina's personal life to understand what might have led to her disappearance. They wanted to know if she had any relationships outside her marriage, was involved in gambling or drugs, and what her daily routines were like. To gather this information, they interviewed her friends and family. Everyone they spoke to described Katrina as a kind, responsible person who always put her duties first and avoided anything risky. Her loved ones said she was dedicated to her job and had a strong work ethic. They also reported that she never showed any signs of addiction or irresponsible behavior. The people who knew Katrina described her as a loyal partner and a hard worker who always did the right thing. During the investigation into her disappearance, a woman came forward with an interesting clue. She claimed to have seen a blue car, similar to Katrina's, parked on a bridge over Rock River on the night she vanished. The trunk was open, and someone was kneeling behind it. Although the witness couldn't describe the person's gender or race, her tip led the police to suspect that Katrina might have been a victim of foul play and ended up in the river. However, they still needed concrete evidence to support this theory. The police continued to investigate Katrina's disappearance, looking into potential motives and suspects. Despite seeming to have a happy marriage, her husband Todd was still a person of interest. As the authorities knew that hidden conflicts or secrets can exist in any relationship, their inquiry led them to a teenager in town who had previously shown an unhealthy obsession with Katrina. Earlier in the year, Katrina had confided in friends about the boy's behavior, including allegations of voyeurism, such as spying on her through her bedroom window. This had made Katrina increasingly anxious at the time. Although the boy's activities had stopped when he left for college, the police wondered if he might have returned and resumed stalking Katrina. They devoted significant resources to finding him. 3 days into the search, crucial clues were discovered on Katrina's cell phone, which was being examined at the crime lab. The phone proved to be a crucial source of evidence for the investigators. By examining Katrina's cell phone records, they uncovered a wealth of information, including her text messages, call logs, pictures, videos, and GPS location data. This information enabled the police to reconstruct a more accurate timeline of Katrina's activities. The investigation revealed that Katrina was having an affair with a coworker, Guy Gabriel. Initially, they had met after work and developed a connection that eventually turned romantic. However, a background check on Guy Gabriel exposed a troubling history of domestic violence. Additionally, the detectives found text messages in which Guy Gabriel demanded that Katrina leave her husband Todd for him. Given Guy Gabriel's violent past and his messages to Katrina, he became the top suspect in her disappearance. The police suspected that Guy Gabriel might have reacted violently toward Katrina because she refused to leave her husband for him. When Katrina's family discovered her affair with Guy, they were shocked and disbelieving. The seemingly perfect couple, Katrina and Todd, had hidden a dark secret. The news of Katrina's infidelity devastated Todd, who was unaware of the affair until the police investigation. Guy Gabriel was questioned by the police at the station, and although he appeared nervous, he admitted to the affair but denied any involvement in Katrina's disappearance. He claimed to have been at work on the night she went missing. During the investigation, the police uncovered an incident that had occurred 2 weeks before Katrina's disappearance. Witnesses reported that a black Volkswagen Jetta had sped through the parking lot of the auto shop where Katrina and Guy worked, causing a scene during lunchtime. A mysterious driver in a VW Jetta threw a stack of flyers out of the car's sunroof, scattering them among the employees gathered outside. The flyers contained a derogatory remark about Katrina and Guy Gabriel's relationship, but the identity of the driver remained unknown. Meanwhile, the police questioned Katrina's hairstylist, who shared that Katrina had confided in her about feeling unsafe and threatened. Katrina had even considered buying a gun for protection and had become paranoid about being followed. She had gone so far as to take her phone to a store to check for a tracking device, suspecting that someone was monitoring her movements. At the police garage, crime scene investigators searched Katrina's car for clues and used a special chemical called luminol to detect blood. They found a large amount of blood in the trunk. Meanwhile, a firefighter pulled a mysterious object from the water, which turned out to be a severely decomposed female body. The body was difficult to identify due to its condition. At the medical examiner's office, dental experts compared the body's teeth to Katrina Smith's dental records and confirmed that the body belonged to her. The autopsy revealed that Katrina's cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Katrina's family was devastated by the news, and her mother, Vicky, was in disbelief. Police cleared the teenage boy who had been allegedly stalking Katrina as a suspect after verifying his alibi. The police then turned their attention to Guy Gabriel, Katrina's boyfriend outside of her marriage. Guy provided an alibi, claiming he was at work during the time of Katrina's disappearance and murder. His managers and coworkers corroborated his alibi, and the police cleared him as a suspect. Although Guy was no longer a suspect, police asked for his perspective on who may have hurt Katrina. Guy revealed that Katrina's husband, Todd, exhibited controlling behavior and encouraged Katrina to leave her marriage. The police investigated Katrina's marriage and discovered several concerning details, including Katrina's desire to divorce Todd, her meeting with a divorce attorney, and her separation from Todd. The police suspected Todd of being behind the mysterious flyer incident at Katrina's workplace. Their suspicion grew stronger when they discovered that Todd had test-driven a black Jetta, similar to the car involved in the flyer incident, around the same time it occurred. When the police informed Katrina's family that Todd was the prime suspect in her murder and was already in custody, they were shocked and devastated. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was particularly affected, feeling physically ill at the thought that Todd could be responsible for her daughter's murder. Police also discovered that Todd's financial investment company was facing legal troubles, providing a potential motive for the crime. Katrina was the sole breadwinner for the family, since Todd was unemployed. The police suspected that Todd might have a motive to kill his wife, as he would gain access to their funds if she left him and their daughters. To gather evidence, the police obtained a search warrant for the couple's home. During the search, they found a baseball bat in the garage with braids of blood on it, which led them to believe it might be the murder weapon. The autopsy revealed that Katrina's injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma, suggesting a bat was used. A DNA test confirmed that the blood on the bat was Katrina's, linking the bat to the crime. The police also found a clean area under the car, which seemed suspicious. Further examination revealed that the blood stains matched Katrina's DNA profile. 30 days after Katrina's murder, Todd was arrested and charged with her killing, bringing relief to her family. At his trial, the prosecution presented evidence that Katrina had recently visited a divorce attorney, indicating marital problems. On the night of the murder, Katrina had gone to Todd's house to do laundry for a job interview the next morning. The prosecution alleged that Katrina told Todd their marriage was over, triggering his violent reaction. They claimed that Todd grabbed a baseball bat, killed Katrina in the garage, and then disposed of her body by throwing it off a bridge at Rock River. The jury found Todd guilty and sentenced him to 55 years in prison. Moving on to the next case. The case of Lauren Hugelmeyer. Raleigh, a rapidly growing city in northeastern North Carolina, is known for its rich history and beautiful oak trees. However, on September 1, 2017, a horrific crime shook the city. That morning, at approximately 1 a.m., the Raleigh Police Department's 9-1 dispatch center received a call from 28-year-old Matthew Phelps. Phelps was distraught and claimed that he had accidentally stabbed his wife, Lauren, to death while dreaming. He said he had suddenly woken up to find his wife lying in a pool of blood on the floor. "I took too much cough medicine, and it affected me," Matthew explained to the operator, saying that it could help with a cold but had made him feel better. He admitted that he had been unable to sleep at night. The operator asked Matthew to check on his wife, inquiring whether she was breathing and if there was any visible movement in her chest. Matthew replied that she did not move. Then he noticed the blood on himself and said it was dry, not wet. During the conversation, Matthew eventually revealed the reason behind his strange behavior and described the events leading up to the incident. Patrol officers from the Raleigh Police Department arrived at Matthew's home on Patuxent Street. Upon entering the home, they found Lauren, 29, lying motionless on the floor, a bloody knife on the bed, and cough drops on the bathroom counter. Despite showing no signs of life, Lauren was transported to the hospital by paramedics, where she was pronounced dead. The investigation into Lauren's death led police to consider conflicting theories about whether it was an accident or a targeted murder, after which they brought Matthew in for further questioning. An autopsy revealed the horrific extent of Lauren's injuries, showing 123 stab wounds, including 44 to the face, with the remainder to her head, neck, and arms. The couple's social media profiles, which contained hundreds of photos, depicted a seemingly happy relationship. Matthew had a clean record, and from the outside, they appeared to be a happy, carefree couple. However, it could not be ruled out that Matthew's actions were influenced by a large dose of cough syrup, which can cause euphoria, delusions, and often lead people to behave strangely. To unravel the mystery behind the murder, police investigated the couple's past. Lauren Hugelmeier was born on June 9, 1988, in Los Angeles County to a deeply religious family. Lauren had a normal childhood with her two older sisters, Beth and Brianna. She graduated from Swain County High School in North Carolina in 2007. She went on to earn a degree in Business Administration and Management from Appalachian State University in 2011. After completing her studies, she worked as an auditor at Quintiles. She also started a side business selling Scentsy products. Lauren was very passionate about Scentsy, and her Facebook page was filled with photos and videos of her side business, including trips she took with other Scentsy sellers. Lauren was a member of Hope Lutheran Church, where she served as a Sunday school teacher and taught children and youth at the church. In her mid-20s, Lauren reconnected with Matthew Phelps, a classmate from high school. Lauren and Matthew had initially lost touch after high school when he transferred schools and her family moved to Raleigh, North Carolina. Notably, their childhood experiences were very different. While Lauren grew up in a loving family, Matthew was far less fortunate. Matthew's parents abandoned him at birth, leaving him to live with his grandparents from a young age. His parents divorced shortly after his birth. His biological father showed no interest in him, and his mother remarried several times, but never provided Matthew with a stable family or lasting relationship with any stepfather. Despite his grandparents' best efforts to love and care for him, Matthew grew up without parents and felt a deep emotional void. This may have contributed to behavioral problems from an early age. He began associating with bad influences and developed a habit of abusing drugs and alcohol during his high school years. Matthew and his friends were known to regularly use Coristidine, the same drug he later claimed to have taken before attacking his wife. While high doses do not typically produce a high, Matthew and his friends used it regardless. Due to his addiction, Matthew's grandparents were compelled to withdraw him from public high school and enroll him in a private Christian academy. This proved successful, and Matthew improved significantly, earning better grades and eventually graduating. He then attended Clear Creek Baptist Bible College in Pineville, Kentucky, graduating in 2011. Matthew came across Lauren's photo and realized they knew each other. After some hesitation, he contacted Lauren through Instagram, liking every photo she posted. The two began communicating, and their text messages quickly evolved into long, late-night phone calls. Before long, both Matthew and Lauren were falling for each other. They began a long-distance relationship, as Matthew was still living in Kentucky at the time. Despite the hundreds of miles separating them, their relationship developed rapidly. After some time, Matthew tried to visit Lauren and eventually relocated to North Carolina to be with her. Since Lauren was very close to her family, she was happy to introduce Matthew to them. Most of her family welcomed him, trusting Lauren's judgment. They saw him as a kind man who genuinely cared for their daughter. Lauren's mother, Lori, believed Matthew was the right person for Lauren. However, her father, Dale, had reservations about the relationship. His concerns may have arisen from protective fatherly instincts or perhaps intuition. In Dale's opinion, Matthew was moving too quickly and might be hiding a secret from Lauren. Despite his suspicions, Dale could not identify precisely what made him uneasy about Matthew. Nevertheless, he chose to put his feelings aside because his daughter appeared genuinely happy. Eventually, Matthew became part of the family. However, during a night out at Lauren's parents' house, he revealed a shocking secret. He had been in a failed marriage before dating Lauren, but refused to share further details. This confession raised questions about his honesty and intentions, particularly given his young age at the time of the divorce and the fact that he had kept it from Lauren for months. Lauren's family was particularly concerned and noted that his body language seemed suspicious. Despite their reservations, Lauren's love for Matthew remained unwavering, and her family chose to support the couple as their relationship continued. Matthew and Lauren eventually became engaged in 2015. The engagement party left a lasting impression on family and friends. Matthew's mother had a strained relationship with Lauren, which became evident when she wore a white dress to the wedding to signal her disapproval. Despite this, the event was a success, and the couple married the following year. The couple were avid Star Wars fans and incorporated the theme into their wedding. With their love for each other and their new life together, Lauren and Matthew appeared very happy. For Lauren, married life exceeded her expectations. She had her own home, a fulfilling job, and a loving husband who made her smile every day. However, the dream marriage soon turned into a grim reality when Matthew began to reveal his true nature. Just a few months after their wedding, Matthew struggled to find employment, and when he did secure a job, he left quickly without much explanation. During periods of unemployment, Matthew spent most of his time playing video games. Meanwhile, Lauren worked multiple jobs to support the family. This created significant financial strain, which was worsened by Matthew's overspending on expensive electronics and gaming equipment. Lauren had saved approximately $10,000, but Matthew depleted it rapidly, spending $1,200 on iTunes and Xbox subscriptions alone. He even took money from Lauren's purse if she refused to fund his lavish lifestyle. Lauren had maintained a decent amount of savings in her bank account before marrying Matthew. However, by the time of her death, only $1,000 remained. In addition to Matthew's spending habits, other problems plagued their relationship. Lauren also experienced difficulties with Matthew's family. During a visit to his family home 6 months after the wedding, his mother was cold toward Lauren, and the couple argued throughout the visit. Consequently, Lauren felt unwelcome and isolated. The disagreements primarily centered on Matthew's spending, which impeded their ability to pursue shared goals and dreams. As previously mentioned, the couple were devoted Star Wars fans and were trying to save money for a trip to Disney World. However, Matthew spent the little money they had saved on his own selfish habits. Lauren also suspected that Matthew was having an affair with their neighbor, with whom he socialized frequently. One evening, while Lauren was cooking dinner and speaking with her sister Beth on the phone, Matthew returned from work but did not stay with Lauren. Instead, he went out with their neighbor. He later sent Lauren a text stating that he was enjoying dinner with the neighbors and told her to eat alone, which further fueled her suspicions. Although Matthew spent considerable time with the neighbor, he was extremely possessive of Lauren. His possessiveness led to frequent arguments over a man at church whom Matthew suspected of flirting with Lauren. Matthew's insecurities, often justified by his past experience of being abandoned by his ex-wife, who had met another man on a mission trip, only worsened the distance between them. This justification did nothing to improve their deteriorating relationship. Less than a year into their marriage, Lauren confided in loved ones about her desire to leave Matthew due to his controlling behavior. Nevertheless, guided by her faith, Lauren was determined to make the marriage work and set aside thoughts of divorce. As a result, she continued to project the image of a perfect marriage on social media, posting photos and videos of the couple with affectionate captions that sharply contrasted with the reality of their troubled relationship. Matthew decided to return to college to become a pastor, hoping this would salvage their marriage. However, Lauren was unimpressed and frustrated by his thoughtless and immature behavior. Lauren eventually resolved to leave Matthew, but she would never have the opportunity to carry out that decision. Instead, she was brutally murdered by her husband in their bed. The investigation quickly reconstructed the events. The crime scene appeared staged. The knife and cough syrup were deliberately placed, and Matthew had only a small amount of blood on him, primarily on his shoes and a few drops on his shirt. This contrasted sharply with the brutal nature of the crime, in which Lauren had been stabbed 123 times. The lack of blood spatter indicated that Matthew had washed himself, which contradicted his claim of being in a delusional state at the time of the murder. Traces of blood were discovered throughout the apartment after a luminol test, indicating that it had been cleaned before police arrived. Matthew appeared notably expressionless when officers encountered him at the scene. Cough syrup manufacturer Bayer later issued a statement denying any connection between the syrup and violent behavior. A medical examination found that the amount of the drug in Matthew's system at the time of the murder was minimal, making it unlikely to have influenced his actions. Despite this, Matthew maintained that the cough syrup was responsible, prompting police to continue searching for additional evidence. The investigation into Matthew's motives led police to his diary, in which he detailed his relationship problems with Lauren, expressing low self-esteem and insecurity from feeling unwelcome by her family. Despite Lauren's best efforts, Matthew never felt he truly fit in with her family. The neighbor Lauren suspected, who was related to Matthew, told police that they were merely friends and had grown close through discussions about anxiety and depression. She also stated that, as they spent more time together, Matthew began discussing darker topics such as suicide and death, potentially planning to access the licensed gun he knew she kept in the house. Further examination of Matthew's phone revealed a suspicious online search history. The searches included queries about the intoxicating effects of cough syrup, such as its ability to cause a foggy feeling, and whether others had ever been high. These searches suggested that Matthew may have planned the crime in advance and considered using cough syrup as a defense. While this evidence was circumstantial and insufficient to build a definitive case, the discovery of a secret Instagram account at Marty_Radical, where Matthew posted dark content inspired by a movie, provided another important piece of evidence. Evidence also showed that Matthew had a fascination with serial killers. This was evident in his portrayal of Patrick Bateman in American Psycho and his expressed interest in understanding what it was like to take another person's life, which he shared with a friend. Before killing Lauren, Matthew posted a photo on Instagram stating, "Everyone thinks I'm a serial killer," with the hashtag #FoundAnAngelToKill. His account frequently referenced demons and evil. When the trial began, prosecutors believed they had sufficient evidence to prove that Matthew had intentionally killed Lauren. However, the defense argued that the act was out of character for Matthew and attributed his behavior to his unstable and depressed mental state at the time. To support this claim, they presented several letters from Matthew's co-workers to the judge, asserting that such behavior was uncharacteristic of him. The prosecution called Matthew's ex-wife to testify, disputing his earlier claims that she had cheated on him. Instead, she stated that Matthew had been unfaithful throughout their marriage. Their marriage, which suffered from similar problems to his marriage to Lauren, included his refusal to work, overspending, and failure to contribute to shared goals. These issues eventually led to their separation. Matthew ultimately accepted a plea deal and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, a felony punishable by death or life imprisonment without parole, in order to avoid the death penalty. When asked to confirm his understanding of the plea, Matthew replied, "Yes, sir." He also admitted to stabbing his wife, Lauren Hugelmeyer, multiple times. On October 5, 2018, the case against Matthew Phelps concluded when he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At his sentencing, Matthew addressed Lauren's family and apologized, stating that he deeply regretted taking Lauren's life, which he acknowledged had profoundly affected many people. Lauren's family did not accept Matthew's apology, finding it hollow and insincere. In response, a family member expressed anger and hatred toward Matthew, stating that they could never forgive him for his callous actions. To this day, Lauren's family still feels guilt for not intervening when they saw the relationship deteriorating. To help others in similar situations, they founded an organization called Lauren's Light, which raises awareness about abusive relationships and domestic violence. Moving on to the next case. Norma McAdam murder case. Every relationship in a person's life rests on the foundation of trust, whether it is between parents and children, husband and wife, or even between a boyfriend and girlfriend. But when someone violates another person's trust in these vital relationships and begins to think negatively about them, it feels deeply painful. Today's case is somewhat similar, where a boy and a girl from Pakistan were very happy in their relationship, but after some time, the girl ended things because she began seeing a dark side of her boyfriend. What the boy then did to his girlfriend shocked the entire nation of Pakistan. Shaukat Ali Muqaddam was not just an ordinary citizen of Pakistan, but also a diplomat and ambassador of the country. Because of this role, he had to reside in various nations. However, in 2021, he was living in Islamabad, Pakistan. At different points in time, Shaukat Ali had also served as Pakistan's ambassador to South Korea and Kazakhstan. Due to these roles, he held a very influential position in Pakistan. His family consisted of 5 members, including Shaukat Muqaddam, his wife Kausar Muqaddam, 2 daughters, and 1 son. On October 23, 1993, a beautiful baby girl was born in Shaukat Ali's home, and they named her Noor. Noor was a healthy and adorable child who laughed often and rarely troubled anyone. Although Shaukat's professional life was extremely demanding and stressful, when he returned home, he devoted quality time to his family. Because of this, his children received an excellent upbringing. From her school years, Noor showed a strong interest in education. She was always reading either her school textbooks or other books. Since Shaukat Muqaddam was a diplomat, he was frequently transferred abroad for work, which is why Noor began her schooling in Ireland. She later completed her high school education in South Korea. After South Korea, the family relocated to Kazakhstan. However, Noor wanted to complete her college education in the United States, where her elder sister Sarah was already living. After spending time in the United States, Noor eventually returned to Islamabad, Pakistan. Just as she had been humble and intelligent during her childhood, she remained equally modest and bright in her adult life. This is why everyone in her family trusted her and readily accepted her decisions. In addition, Noor loved animals, especially stray dogs and cats, and she fed them whenever she found time. Even though Noor came from a wealthy background, she had no fondness for material possessions. From all this, it is clear that Noor was kind-hearted, grounded, intelligent, and confident. Alongside these qualities, Noor also had a strong passion for art and calligraphy, and she often created religious paintings as well. As mentioned earlier, coming from a rich diplomatic family, social gatherings and parties were common at diplomats' residences. As a result, Shaukat Muqaddam frequently took his family to such events, as they were ideal for networking and building professional connections. It was at one such gathering in 2018 that Noor met a boy named Zahir Jaffer. Zahir and Noor would later become central figures in this case. Before moving forward, it is important to briefly understand Zahir's background. Zahir Jaffer was born in the United States, but he spent his childhood and teenage years in Pakistan. Later, Zahir completed his graduation in the U.S. and also spent some time living in the United Kingdom. Zahir's father was Zakir Jaffer, a highly successful businessman. Because of his father's extensive business activities, the Jaffer family was counted among the wealthiest families in Pakistan. They owned multiple businesses, including ventures in healthcare, oil, real estate, and construction. These enterprises also allowed them to collaborate with the country's military. One such company was Ahmed Jaffer and Company, where Zahir Jaffer later became the CEO, while his father Zakir Jaffer had previously managed the firm. Over time, however, Zahir's interests shifted, and he began working as a therapist at a company called Therapy Works. At this organization, Zahir listened to school children and spoke to them about mental health care. He also organized lectures and presentations aimed at educating children on mental health awareness. But the surprising thing here is that Zahir himself was not introverted or angry from childhood. He also had very few friends and rarely went to parties with them. Yet it was at one such gathering that he met Noor, and he was drawn to her. Noor also enjoyed talking with Zahir. Perhaps this happened because their personalities were different, and it is often said that opposite personalities attract each other. However, both of their families already knew one another, as they frequently attended such events. It was from this party that a friendship between Noor and Zahir began. After some time, that friendship turned into love, and they both entered into a romantic relationship. It was not the case that they kept this relationship hidden from their parents or friends. Instead, both their families and friends were aware that Zahir and Noor were dating. Both families were pleased, believing that Noor complimented Zahir and Zahir complimented Noor. In fact, Noor brought out a side of Zahir that no one had witnessed before, as he had been very introverted earlier. But after meeting Noor, his personality slowly began to change. He started enjoying life, socializing with others, and at one party, people were shocked to see Zahir dancing with Noor, including his own family, because they had never imagined seeing this aspect of his personality. Everything seemed to be going well, but as the relationship aged, problems began to surface. In the beginning, everything was fine, both of them were enjoying themselves, and their families were also very happy. But after some time, a different side of Zahir emerged in front of Noor. Noor later discovered that Zahir was an extremely aggressive and abusive man. Allegedly, Zahir had physically and mentally abused Noor on several occasions. Not only that, he had also once raised his hand against his own mother. As a result, after nearly 3 years of being together, when Noor could no longer tolerate Zahir, she ended the relationship at the start of 2021. In both families, there was dissatisfaction over their children ending the relationship. Since neither family was ordinary, and in such wealthy households it is uncommon for a boy and a girl to enter a relationship, break up shortly afterward, and then later pursue other relationships. In fact, people from such backgrounds often view relationships like business arrangements. Like many affluent families, they marry off their sons or daughters where they see potential benefit. Aside from this, Zahir was also unhappy that Noor had left him, and he took it as a blow to his male ego. However, after some time, Zahir began thinking about moving on and decided that he would return to the United States and settle there, as he held U.S. citizenship along with Pakistani citizenship. Now let us move to July 18, 2021. On this day, Zahir booked a taxi to travel to Islamabad International Airport. According to Pakistan Standard Time, Zahir's flight to New York was scheduled for 3:50 a.m. on July 19th. He had already packed his luggage and informed his family about his plans. But before leaving, he wanted to meet Noor one last time, so he called her on the evening of July 18th. At that moment, Noor was at home, preparing for Eid with her family. Zahir told Noor that he was leaving the country for New York and would never return, that he planned to settle in the U.S., and requested that she meet him once before he departed. Zahir also asked Noor to come to his house, saying they would meet there, and that when he left for the airport from his home, he would first drop her back at her house. Even though they had already broken up, they had been in a relationship for 3 years before that, which led Noor to agree to meet him. After this, at 9:05 p.m., Noor left her home. However, she did not tell her family that she was going to Zahir's house. Instead, she told them she was visiting a friend and would return shortly. Around 10 p.m., Noor reached outside Zahir's house at the same location in Sector F7-4. But from this point onward, strange events began to unfold. As mentioned earlier, Zahir's flight was scheduled for 3:50 a.m., yet between 10 and 11 p.m., Zahir called his travel agency multiple times. Zahir contacted his travel agency and began asking very unusual questions, such as what would happen if he did not board the flight, whether he would receive a refund, and what would occur if he decided to book tickets again after 10 days. Some time later, Zahir called the travel agency once more and stated that he was no longer canceling the ticket and had decided to travel to the U.S. on that same flight. But it is important to note that during this entire period, Noor was inside the house with him. For her, however, the house was unfamiliar because she had never been there before. After that, the taxi Zahir had booked to go to the airport arrived outside Jaffer's house at exactly 11 p.m. However, Zahir did not come out of the house for half an hour. During this time, the taxi driver called Zahir 2 or 3 times, but Zahir told him to wait, saying that he would come out in just 5 minutes. Then, at 12:07 a.m., Zahir called the taxi driver again and said that his plan to go to the airport was now canceled. He explained that even if they left at that moment, he would not be able to catch his flight despite waiting for over an hour. Zahir paid the taxi driver half of the fare. In fact, he had booked the taxi for 2,000 Pakistani rupees. After this, the taxi driver left the location. But at 1:40 a.m., Zahir called the taxi driver again and asked him to return to his house. The taxi driver returned to Zahir's house, knowing that he would receive the full payment this time. Yet again, Zahir made the driver wait outside the house for several minutes. Then, at 2:15 a.m., Zahir finally came out carrying his luggage. The strange thing this time was that Noor was also with him, and she was not wearing any sandals, which the driver found odd. What seemed even more unusual was that Zahir was talking to Noor during the ride, but Noor did not respond to him at all. Although the driver did not focus much on this at the time, halfway through the journey, Zahir told the driver to turn the car back toward the house. He said they were already too late, and that he did not think they would reach the airport in time to catch the flight. After that, the taxi driver dropped them back at Jaffer's house at around 2:35 a.m. But as soon as Noor stepped out of the taxi, Zahir pulled her forcefully back inside the house. According to the taxi driver's statement, he felt that Noor was not supposed to go back into the house with Zahir, but Zahir dragged her inside against her will. From that point, Noor stayed at Zahir's house throughout July 19th, and then July 20th arrived, which was the day of Eid. Noor had gone to Zahir's house to meet him on July 18th at 9:05 p.m., and now more than 24 hours had passed. Meanwhile, Noor's father and mother had returned home after Eid shopping. When they realized that their daughter had been missing for an entire day, at 12:57 a.m. on July 20th, Kukut McAdam sent Noor a text message asking where she was. Noor did not respond to that message. Later, at 5:48 a.m., Noor's mother sent her a message, and two family friends also tried calling Noor, but there was still no response. This made Noor's parents extremely worried, and they were about to report the matter to the police. However, at 10:43 a.m., Noor sent a voice message to her mother. The contents of that recording were never released publicly, but it was the final time Noor's mother, Kausar McAdam, heard her daughter's voice. After this voice message, another strange event occurred. Zahir immediately called Noor's mother from his own phone and told her that Noor was not at his house, attempting to show that he had not even seen her. Then, from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. that same day, Zahir repeatedly called his father, Zakir Jaffer. Later, between around 7 p.m. and 10 p.m., Noor appeared on CCTV footage. By that time, her condition was extremely poor, and it appeared that Zahir had severely tortured her. In the CCTV video, Noor is seen jumping from the first-floor balcony of Zahir's house and landing directly onto an iron grill. This caused an injury to her abdomen, which is why she is seen holding her stomach in the footage. She was distressed due to Zahir's harassment and was trying to escape the house. However, the security guard closed the gate, and at the same time, Zahir also jumped from the balcony to catch Noor and dragged her back inside. While pulling her back, Noor fell to the ground, but Zahir continued dragging her into the house. It is important to note that Zahir and Noor were not alone inside the house. There was also a security guard, a cook, and a gardener present. Yet none of them helped Noor. In fact, between July 18th and July 20th, Noor tried to escape from the house 6 times. Each time, one of Zahir's servants informed him, and Noor was always caught. This particular escape attempt made Zahir extremely angry. After dragging Noor back inside, he called his father once again at around 7:30 p.m. After that, Zahir did not call anyone for the next 30 minutes, because during that time, he first tried to shoot Noor with his handgun, but when he pulled the trigger, the gun jammed. However, even after this, Zahir did not abandon his intention to kill Noor. The thought was already fixed in his mind. So he pulled out a Swiss knife and began stabbing Noor all over her body. During this, Noor clawed at Zahir's face and arms with her nails, but after a while, Noor's condition worsened so severely that she lost consciousness. Noor was unconscious, yet Zahir continued stabbing her with the knife. After that, he seized Noor by the neck and kept pressing until her final breath left her body. Later, Noor's post-mortem report revealed that she died due to suffocation, but before killing Noor, Zahir assaulted her multiple times. But Zahir did not stop even then. After Noor's death, he took out his knife again and started slashing Noor's throat, and eventually he separated her head from her body. After killing Noor, Zahir quickly called his father and his friends, saying that thieves had entered the house and that he needed help. At the same time, some of Zahir's friends started heading toward his house. However, Zahir's father was not present there. That is why he called the CEO of the company where Zahir worked, called Therapy Works, and told him to immediately go to his house and save his son at any cost. In reality, Zahir's father, Zakir Jaffer, contacted the company's CEO because they wanted to destroy all evidence of Noor's murder by reaching Zahir. Moreover, the CEO had no option but to comply because Zahir's father was financially supporting the company. Around 8:30 p.m., Tahir Zahor, the CEO of Therapy Works, arrived outside Zahir's house along with 6 of his employees. In addition, some of Zahir's friends were also there. However, the main door of Zahir's house remained locked, so Tahir brought a ladder and, along with his employees, entered through a first-floor window. But as soon as they reached the first floor, Zahir attacked one of the employees with a knife, stabbing him through the chin and tongue. Zahir was extremely furious at that moment, so 5 to 6 people immediately restrained him to control the situation. After this, Zahir's hands were tied behind his back, and ropes were also fastened around his legs. But when the people entered Zahir's room from the balcony, they were completely shocked. There was blood spread everywhere on the floor, and even splattered on the walls. Then they saw Noor's body lying in the middle of the room, but her head was lying 3 feet away from her body. Everyone inside the room was stunned while trying to control Zahir, and after witnessing Noor's dead body. Meanwhile, the neighbors had also become alert because Zahir was screaming loudly while being restrained, which led the neighbors to call the police. After that, the police arrived at the scene, and on July 20th, around 10 p.m., the police informed Kakut McAdam that his daughter had been murdered. After hearing this heartbreaking news, the McAdam family home was filled with mourning because their youngest and most beloved daughter was no longer alive. But Noor's family knew who was responsible for all this, and now they wanted Zahir to be punished under Pakistani law, meaning the death sentence. After that, the police arrested Zahir, but they were concerned about how he would confess to his crime. However, Zahir did something very unusual here as well. As soon as the police apprehended him, he confessed in a brief statement that he had killed Noor and claimed that he did it because he loved her deeply. He had even proposed marriage to Noor, but she had rejected his proposal and later ended the relationship. This deeply hurt Zahir's ego, so he booked one-way tickets for himself and Noor to New York for July 19th. Before this, Zahir had decided that if Noor agreed to go to New York with him, they would get married and settle there. But if Noor refused, he would kill her. However, from July 18th to July 20th, Zahir kept pressuring Noor to marry him, and when Noor refused, Zahir ultimately attacked her in an extremely brutal manner. Although all the servants in Zahir's house were aware of what he did to Noor, none of them tried even once to stop him or call the police, because they were afraid that if they did, Zahir would not spare them. Now, even though Zahir had confessed his crime to the police, when the case went to court, his behavior there was very strange. First, he appeared in court looking untidy, as if he had not bathed for several days. In addition, he shouted loudly inside the courtroom and even hurled abuse at the judge. Furthermore, the police had to forcibly drag him into and out of the courtroom. However, he was doing all this to show that he was mentally unstable and therefore should be spared the death penalty for Noor's murder. If it were proven that Zahir was mentally unstable, then his punishment would be reduced, and he would also avoid the death sentence. In fact, Zahir had schizophrenia and wanted to exploit this condition by claiming in court that he was mentally unfit. Schizophrenia is a serious mental disorder in which a person is often lost in an imaginary world and has very little awareness of reality. Because of this, such a person frequently behaves in unusual ways. But when Zahir's medical examination was conducted, the report clearly stated that he was mentally fit and that whatever he did to Noor was done consciously. This made it clear that Zahir was an abusive and violent individual. Moreover, there were multiple harassment cases registered against Zahir in both the United States and Pakistan. During the ongoing court proceedings in this case, people across Pakistan raised their voices demanding justice for Noor. Rallies and marches were organized on a daily basis. As a result, on February 24, 2022, Noor finally received justice, and Zahir was sentenced to 2 death penalties, one for physically assaulting Noor and the other for murdering her. Additionally, 2 members of his household staff, Iftikhar and Muhammad Jan, were also sentenced to 10 years in prison. From photographs alone, one might not realize it, but Zahir was a strong, tall, and aggressive man, with whom a gentle and innocent girl like Noor spent nearly 48 hours. And those 48 hours were nothing short of hell for her. With this, the Noor McAdam murder case comes to an end here. Moving on to the next case. The case of Rochelle L. Waterman. Carl Dock is a real estate broker, and his wife, Lori, is a special education teacher who works with children with disabilities. They have 2 children, a son, Jerry, who is attending college, and a daughter, Rochelle, a high school student. Rochelle is not only academically accomplished, but also actively participates in sports. Their family was considered a role model, living harmoniously and showing love for one another. Residing in a small, close-knit community where everyone knew each other, the Dock family was well respected. Lori was admired for her compassionate and kind demeanor, always willing to assist others. She was described as an exemplary wife and mother who prioritized her family's needs and ensured they lacked nothing. She was also known to be deeply religious. On Friday, November 13, 2004, Lori attended a social fundraising event. That same day, Carl was away on a business trip, and Rochelle was on a school volleyball trip for a tournament. After the event, Lori returned home around 11 p.m. and went to bed. Tragically, no one saw her alive again after that night. On November 14, 2004, in the small town of Craig, Alaska, a hunter called the police to report finding a burned-out van in the woods. He suspected there was a body inside. When authorities arrived, they found the van still smoking, and upon closer inspection, they discovered something horrifying. A severely burned human body was inside the van. The burns were so extensive that the skull and parts of the body were visible between the front and back seats. The body was charred and blackened in multiple areas, with most of the clothing destroyed, exposing bones. Initially, police suspected a tragic accident. However, further examination suggested the fire had been deliberate. One indication was the body's location. As noted, it was found between the front and back seats, which seemed unusual if the fire had been accidental. Typically, a driver would remain in the seat, and a passenger, if present, would likely not have sustained such severe burns. Investigators also discovered traces of gasoline on the exterior of the van and on the nearby ground, suggesting someone had poured fuel to intentionally set the vehicle ablaze. The evidence indicated this was not an accident, but a murder staged to appear as one. On Sunday, Lori's husband, Carl, and their daughter, Rochelle, returned home to find Lori and her truck missing. They noticed several unusual details around the house. Her bed was unmade, which was unusual because she was meticulous and always made her bed first thing in the morning. In the kitchen, there was an empty wine bottle and a used wine glass, which was strange because Lori did not drink alcohol. Deeply worried, Carl began searching for Lori. He contacted friends and family, checking locations where she might be, but no one had seen or spoken to her since Friday. Recognizing that her disappearance was completely out of character, he contacted emergency services to report her missing. By Monday, still with no news, Carl grew increasingly anxious. However, his daughter Rochelle appeared calm. He advised her not to attend school, even though it was a school day, but she insisted on going and remaining at school all day as usual. Strangely, her classmates and teachers later observed that Rochelle seemed indifferent to her mother's disappearance. She appeared unconcerned. One teacher approached her to ask if she was okay, and she replied that she was perfectly fine. She added that her mother must have been drunk and driving or something similar. At that time, news broke that a truck had been found in the woods containing human remains. Because Lori was missing, rumors began circulating. Some of Rochelle's classmates suggested that the body in the van might be her mother. This caused her to lose composure, and witnesses reported that she began acting aggressively and appeared to have a breakdown. Her teachers then decided it would be best for her to go home. When Rochelle returned, she encountered a police officer. Authorities explained that they could not be 100% certain that the body discovered was her mother, Lori, because identification was difficult due to the body being severely burned. However, since the truck belonged to Lori, it was highly likely that the body was hers. Upon hearing this news, Rochelle and her father, Carl, were heartbroken. Both broke down in tears. When they were informed that the death was not accidental but a murder, they were shocked and devastated. They could not fathom that anyone could harm Lori, especially since she had always been kind to everyone and was universally loved. After identifying the body as Lori's, police obtained a search warrant to investigate the family home. Inside, they collected crucial evidence. In Lori's room, investigators found the tip of a rubber glove, synthetic rope fibers, and a shoe print on the windowsill. The evidence suggested that the perpetrator had entered the home with the express intention of killing Lori, as no items had been stolen. This implied that the killer was someone familiar with the family and knew the house well. Officers launched an investigation and began questioning Lori's relatives and close acquaintances. The first suspect was Carl, her husband, as in cases like this the spouse is often the primary suspect. However, he had an alibi. He had been away on a business trip and could provide evidence to confirm this. Moreover, during conversations with detectives, he appeared genuinely devastated by his wife's death. His grief seemed authentic, so he was ruled out as a suspect. Investigators then questioned Rochelle, and several details in her statements raised suspicions. They discovered that she associated with dangerous individuals, specifically Jason Arendt and Brian Riddell. Both men were older than she was and had reputations as troublemakers. Police had taken notice of them previously, as neither maintained steady employment and both appeared to live recklessly. Brian had been Rochelle's boyfriend for a period before they broke up. After the breakup, she began dating Jason, who was 24 at the time and a friend of Brian. Rochelle's mother disapproved of her dating older men, especially those considered dangerous and irresponsible, which caused many arguments between her and Rochelle. Detectives brought Brian and Jason in for questioning about Lori's murder, but both denied involvement. They claimed they had been at Brian's house watching a movie on the night of the crime. However, officers remained suspicious and continued questioning until Jason broke under pressure. He eventually confessed, revealing that Brian was the killer and that his own role had been limited to driving Lori. Following Jason's confession, detectives offered him a deal in exchange for his cooperation. They provided him with a hidden microphone and sent him to speak with Brian to obtain a recorded confession. Although the police did not release the recording publicly, it confirmed that Brian admitted to the crime, even if some details were withheld. When detectives interrogated Brian again, they assured him that Jason had not betrayed him. A conversation between Brian and Jason, recorded via Jason's hidden microphone, revealed the full truth. Brian confessed completely and disclosed all the horrific details of the crime. They had planned to stage Lori's death as a car accident, making it appear that she had been driving under the influence, which resulted in her death. To avoid leaving evidence, Brian shaved his hair. They broke into Lori's home while she was preparing for bed, tied her hands, and forced her into the kitchen, demanding the keys to her car. They then opened a bottle of wine, poured a glass, and forced Lori to drink it. Brian and Jason continued making her drink until she had consumed the entire bottle, an excessive amount for someone who rarely drank alcohol. Lori became intoxicated rapidly. Immediately afterward, Jason and Brian forced her into the van. Brian took the driver's seat, and they drove into a remote forest to find a location where they could stage a fatal accident. Just before dawn, they stopped on an isolated, seldom-traveled road. Jason deliberately attempted to break Lori's neck to make it appear as though she had died in an accident. He struck her forcefully with the edge of his hand, but failed to kill her. When that attempt failed, Jason began hitting Lori's neck with a flashlight, delivering multiple powerful blows, but this too was unsuccessful. Determined to end her life, he resorted to strangling her until she stopped breathing. In her final moments, she tried to speak, repeatedly asking a question, but her words were unclear, so Jason could not understand. Later, Brian speculated that she had been trying to ask why they were committing such an act, but she never had the opportunity to express it clearly. Jason and Brian had originally planned to stage a car accident, but after killing Lori, they realized that plan would not succeed. Instead, they drove deeper into the woods and decided that the only way to destroy the evidence was to burn the car. This is how Lori's life was ended. Upon hearing their confession, police asked why they committed the crime. They explained that they believed they were protecting Rochelle. Rochelle had created an internet blog called My Shitty Life, where she described her life as miserable. In the blog, she criticized the small town where she lived, the people around her, society, and particularly her mother, Lori. According to Rochelle, her mother was cruel, frequently criticizing her appearance and clothing. Her mother also scolded her and her friends for eating unhealthy food and drinking inappropriate beverages. In one blog post, Rochelle admitted that during a heated argument, she became so angry at her mother's words that she pushed her down the stairs. On the day Lori was killed, Rochelle posted on her blog, informing readers that her mother had been killed and noting that she would not have access to her computer until the weekend because the police had taken it for investigation. Notably, she wrote this on the day of her mother's death, before the body had even been discovered. When questioned by detectives, Jason claimed that Rochelle had confided in him about the abuse she suffered at home from her mother. He stated that she even showed him bruises as proof and claimed that it was Rochelle who suggested killing her mother, Lori. However, when Rochelle was questioned, she completely denied this. She insisted that she never proposed such an idea and that it was not part of any plan. She also stated that she did not believe Jason was involved. She admitted, however, to having a troubled relationship with her mother, explaining that they argued frequently. She claimed her mother often criticized her, including her choice of friends, clothing, appearance, and eating habits. Rochelle further accused her mother of committing terrible acts, such as threatening her with a knife and on one occasion, saying she would sell her. No evidence was found to suggest that Lori insulted or harmed her daughter. People who knew Lori spoke positively about her. Police discovered a letter Lori had written to Rochelle, in which she referred to Rochelle as her beloved daughter. In the letter, Lori expressed how difficult it was to navigate the tension between them, explaining that her actions came from love, as any mother would act toward a daughter she truly cared for. Rochelle told detectives that when she confided in Jason about the conflicts with her mother, he suggested finding a way to deal with Lori. She also claimed that she repeatedly told Jason she did not want that to happen. However, her statements raised suspicions due to contradictions. She initially said that Jason could not carry out such an act, but later admitted that he had repeatedly suggested getting rid of her mother. Another questionable point is that if Rochelle was truly unaware of the plan, how did she know that her mother, Lori, had died before the body was even discovered? During interrogation, Rochelle lied repeatedly, but eventually realized her lies had been uncovered. She ultimately decided to confess. She explained that at first there was no plan to harm her mother or take her life. She simply wanted independence and to free herself from parental control. However, Jason suggested that killing Lori would be a faster and easier solution. Rochelle, Jason, and Brian then agreed and began planning. She provided instructions on how to enter the house and identified the ideal day for the act, believing she would not be suspected because she would be away on a school trip. On November 19, 2004, Rochelle, Jason, and Brian were arrested for several crimes, including conspiracy, unlawful imprisonment, theft, assault, and murder. Brian Riddell pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Jason Arendt received 50 years for murder and an additional life sentence for complicity. Rochelle, however, pleaded not guilty. During the trial, both Brian and Jason testified against her. The trial was complicated, involving issues with the jury and lawyers, and because she was underage, despite the crime occurring in 2004, her sentencing was delayed until 2011. Ultimately, Rochelle Waterman was found guilty, but only on charges of negligence and manslaughter. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Having served her sentence, she is now free. This crime was highly publicized and profoundly tragic. It tells the heartbreaking story of Lori, a mother devoted to her daughter, only wanting the best for her. Understandably, no mother would remain calm upon learning that her young daughter was dating men more than 9 years older than her. No parent would approve of such a situation. As children grow up, they sometimes fail to recognize that their parents' strictness or actions stem from love and a desire to protect their happiness. However, this cannot justify Rochelle's actions. There was no evidence suggesting that Lori abused her daughter. In many cases, proving such allegations is difficult. For instance, whether Rochelle was subjected to constant criticism or psychological abuse by Lori is hard to confirm. Furthermore, Rochelle was known to lie, while many others described Lori as kind and compassionate, making the outcome all the more tragic. Moving on to the next case. The case of Tammy Epperson. Tammy Epperson was an attractive woman who had pursued a modeling career but abandoned the industry due to substance abuse, eventually living on Skid Row in Los Angeles. By the age of 30, she had become addicted to drugs. However, Tammy recognized her struggle and resolved to turn her life around. She entered a rehabilitation program and by 2000, at the age of 38, had successfully reclaimed control over her life. After a long battle with addiction, she broke free from the cycle of substance abuse, overcame her destructive habits, and embarked on a new chapter. Determined to help others, Tammy committed herself to supporting people seeking opportunities to improve their lives. Tammy lived in Banton Plaza, a community designed to assist those pursuing a fresh start. This state-funded facility served as a safe haven for individuals recovering from addiction or who had successfully done so. For many residents, it provided protection from the outside world. The area was fenced and guarded by 24-hour security, with all visitors required to sign a logbook. Despite these measures, the security proved insufficient against what was to occur. Tammy resided in a small ground-floor studio where she was brutally attacked inside her apartment. Police arrived at the scene around 9 p.m. on November 13, 2000. Inside Tammy's apartment, all the furniture was destroyed and glassware, ceramics, and appliances were smashed and scattered. Her personal belongings were thrown onto the bed, suggesting the attacker may have been searching for something. Police speculated that the motive might have been theft or drug-related activity. Tammy was found lying on the floor, her face severely disfigured. Investigators considered the possibility of abuse based on her injuries and the state of her clothing. The small apartment and the extreme brutality left officers stunned. Police reported that the perpetrator specifically targeted Tammy, slamming her against the wall multiple times and causing serious injuries. The assault continued once she was on the floor, with the attacker using whatever objects were available as weapons. The violent attack destroyed everything around her, producing significant noise, yet no neighbors reported hearing anything. Forensic examination indicated that Tammy had been dead for at least a day before police arrived. Neighbors claimed they had not heard any disturbance, despite the apartment's poor soundproofing. A close friend of Tammy had reported being unable to contact her for several hours, eventually hearing rumors of her death and alerting authorities. Police responded to the apartment and found Tammy's face unrecognizable due to disfigurement. A large screwdriver discovered under her shoulder was determined to be the weapon used, with deep circular holes in her face confirming this. Officers speculated that the attack may have been motivated by Tammy's beauty, targeting her face and neck with lethal precision. A forensic expert was called to the scene to reconstruct the events and analyze the evidence, spending 7 hours in Tammy's apartment followed by additional hours processing and organizing the findings. Blood was found in the bathroom, while her body was located in the living room, indicating the attack likely began in the bathroom and continued as she was dragged into the living room. The perpetrator used multiple items as weapons, including a stool, a vase, and a lamp, all of which were broken and stained with blood. These items were collected as evidence and sent to a lab for thorough analysis. Notably, the extreme noise of the attack went unnoticed by other residents. Investigators also discovered key evidence in the sink, including a rag likely containing the attacker's blood, a water bottle with a red fingerprint, and a trash can holding tissues with similar marks. In addition to the attack, Tammy had been abused, as shown by her disheveled clothing and underwear. This was verified by a forensic expert. The forensic expert collected samples from Tammy's body to extract the DNA of the murder suspect. Due to the nature of the crime, the police began searching for Tammy's relatives. Inside her apartment, they discovered several framed photos of her modeling career and an educational certificate, along with documents concerning her addiction treatment. There was no evidence of any family, friends, or boyfriends among her belongings. According to acquaintances, Tammy had indeed overcome her bad habits and was living a normal life. However, she still had many suspicious individuals around her who were struggling with addiction. Not only had she overcome her addiction, but she had also secured a respectable job. Tammy became an office manager at a Hollywood phone service catering to celebrities. She also volunteered at a nearby church where she supported people struggling with addiction. She took on this role because she wanted to help people in need. Since the attacker aimed to harm her appearance, and because she was very attractive, the police suspected that the attacker could have been Tammy's rejected lover or a secret admirer. Soon after, the police received information regarding a potential suspect. A resident of the apartment complex told the police that the attacker could be Ronald Sims. He had a history of serious drug addiction and was still dealing with his own problems. Ronald had previously dated Tammy, but their relationship ended when she overcame her addiction while he continued to struggle with his own. Despite this, they stayed in contact and maintained a friendly relationship. Tammy believed that Ronald needed her support, so she offered him advice and guidance based on her own experiences. Police quickly contacted Ronald as a potential suspect in the murder. However, he denied any wrongdoing, claiming he had a friendly relationship with Tammy and that they had never fought. He insisted that he could never hurt her. Ronald revealed a darker story. He stated that Tammy had met a man in her church counseling sessions who had become a stalker. To ensure her safety, Ronald felt the need to keep an eye on her. This stalker was Troy Powell, a 32-year-old man on probation after serving time for prior crimes. The three were friends and often socialized together, attending church together. However, It was believed that Troy had romantic feelings for Tammy. From their first meeting, he began pursuing her, showering her with flowers and stuffed animals. He would wait for her in his pickup truck almost every day, offering her rides. During the citywide bus drivers' strike, Tammy would occasionally ride in his truck, though she usually traveled with someone else. Ronald knew Troy struggled with addiction, and Tammy considered him potentially dangerous, which was why she rarely accepted his offers. She told Ronald multiple times that she only sought Troy's help occasionally. However, Troy misunderstood her, believing she was willing to rely on him and thinking he had a chance with her. In reality, Tammy felt obligated to help him overcome his addiction but had no interest in a romantic relationship. She provided him advice and support while keeping her distance. She made it clear to him that she was not interested in anything beyond friendship. Despite this, Troy grew increasingly persistent, and his obsession with Tammy became more apparent. As a result, Tammy tried to avoid close contact with him. Ronald believed that Troy was involved in her murder. Troy was aggressive, short-tempered, and obsessive toward her. In Tammy's apartment, the police discovered a disturbing phone book containing records of many calls from Troy. The notes detailed the times he called and the duration of their conversations. Many of these notes indicated that Tammy had asked him to stop calling her. Despite this, Troy continued to contact her on the same day and for an extended period. Eventually, one of Troy's acquaintances informed Ronald that Troy had confessed to the murder. Ronald then reported this to the police. According to witness statements, Troy said that he had visited Tammy. They had talked, but then an argument occurred. In a fit of rage, he stated that he had killed her. Troy was missing and may have fled. The police reviewed the logs of Tammy's residence and discovered that Troy had entered the building on the day of the murder and left just a few hours later. As Troy exited the building, he was asked about Tammy, as residents are required to accompany visitors. Troy smirked and claimed that Tammy was resting, and the guards believed him, allowing him to leave. He was the last person to visit Tammy's apartment. That same day, Ronald said he had plans to work with Tammy at the church. He attempted to call her, but she did not answer, which was unusual. The church confirmed that Tammy had not attended. The following morning, Ronald went to her workplace, but she was still absent. He was struggling with substance abuse at the time and was not allowed into her apartment. However, he noticed Troy's red pickup truck parked outside, which caused him concern. He continued trying to call Tammy, but she still did not answer. Consequently, he decided to contact the police. Police reconstructed the events of that tragic day and concluded that the night before the murder, Tammy had left church with Troy. They stopped at a store where he bought a Bible. Troy persuaded her that he needed help and advice with his addiction. Tammy felt she could not refuse him, which led him to her home. Police investigated Troy Powell's criminal history and discovered a long list of convictions, including serious offenses such as drug use and distribution, theft, and abuse. He had previously served time in prison for assaulting another woman he had stalked, who survived. Troy was clearly a threat to society, particularly to women. Despite his criminal record, he appeared attractive to women. Police were able to locate Troy's vehicle, a red pickup truck matching the description. Ronald provided a detailed account, stating that he had seen the car Troy used to meet Tammy on the day of the murder. The police had a breakthrough when a patrol officer noticed an unfamiliar car in a hotel parking lot. The officer identified it as a bright red pickup truck. He checked the license plate number and confirmed that it was Troy's car. The police were notified and quickly arrived to arrest Troy. They waited outside the hotel for Troy to drive away. Troy eventually arrived and was arrested. The detainee identified himself as Charles Vanoy, and after checking the documents, the authorities confirmed his claim. Despite this, the authorities decided to detain him and investigate the red marks on his hat. He explained that his friend Troy had given him the car the day before and that he had taken it that night along with a jacket, a camera, and other items. Charles and Troy were former cellmates and had maintained contact after their release. The police quickly searched the hotel room and found a camera containing film. Once developed, the photos showed Tammy, Charles, and Troy together. Charles explained that they had all met at a church where Tammy supported people recovering from substance abuse. The DNA test took longer than expected, but eventually confirmed that the blood found on the baseball cap did not belong to Tammy. The police decided to question Charles, who eventually revealed that he possessed important information but requested protection from prosecution in exchange. The police agreed to his terms. Charles stated that Troy had confessed to killing Tammy, who had never returned his feelings. Troy had given Charles the pickup truck and planned to evade the police. Charles Vano insisted that he had no involvement in the case. However, during questioning, he provided details about Tammy's death that only the perpetrators or witnesses would know. It remains unclear whether he learned this information from Troy or if he had been present at the crime scene. Consequently, Charles was compelled to cooperate with the investigation. He informed the police that Troy was supposed to call him at 7 p.m. that same day. Charles agreed to help the police apprehend the killer. Troy then called Charles, and during that time, the police were able to locate Troy. He was arrested while in a hotel. His DNA was found on Tammy's body after the attack, and multiple fingerprints linked him to various items. Tammy's blood was also discovered on his clothing, resulting in Troy being held responsible for the crime. In his confession, Troy admitted to killing Tammy, but claimed that he had been insane at the time. He stated that he suffered from mental health issues and had not taken his prescribed medication for an extended period due to financial difficulties. Troy was charged with premeditated murder, burglary, abuse, and torture, providing the prosecution with a strong case for the death penalty. However, Troy denied full responsibility. He asserted that he suffered from a mental disorder that rendered him unfit to stand trial. A psychiatric evaluation was therefore ordered, which ultimately concluded that he was sane during the attack. Troy recounted the events of the case in detail to his friend Charles, who later became a key witness for the prosecution. Troy attributed his actions to childhood trauma, stating that he had endured abuse from his alcoholic father throughout his early life. He argued that this had caused a psychological problem that made him react violently whenever he was rejected by a woman. A key moment in the hearing was Troy's own testimony in his defense. He admitted that he could have been the killer, but claimed that he could not remember any details. He also asserted that Tammy was still alive when he left the apartment, arguing that the murder had not been premeditated. One of the most shocking allegations presented by the prosecution was that Troy had tortured Tammy for an extended period before she died. The jury found Troy Powell guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to death. He is currently on death row at San Quentin State Prison, awaiting execution. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.